Chapter 13. Before the old man died, 3 years after Connor had first arrived at the croft, he taught the young man the art of his former trade as a blacksmith. Connor then went to work in a nearby village to supplement their income at the local forge. The death of MacDonald hit Heather very hard, and it was over a year before her grief subsided enough for them to begin living a normal life once more. Connor himself missed the taciturn old Scot, but he had found something with Heather that had made his life a pleasant experience. They were not blissfully happy. Things were too hard for such a state. But they loved each other, and, more important still, they liked and respected each other. They were comfortable enough not to need words when they were unnecessary, and able to feel that silence could be shared as well as empty talk. They fought, too, over certain issues, each showing an independence of spirit without which a man or a woman wears the yoke of the other. One fine summer day, Connor was just finishing his work at the forge. His busy right hand hammered at a bright shoe, fresh from the charcoal fire, until it was shaped to the hoof of the cart horse awaiting it. He took the off hind leg of the beast between his own, making soothing noises to the animal to keep it still, then pressed the still glowing iron to its hoof. The strong-smelling odour of the smoke assailed his nostrils. He dunked the shoe in a bucket of water, waited until the steam had subsided and the hissing had stopped, before nailing it into place. Looking up, he saw Heather coming through the village to meet him. They would walk home together through the glen. It was something he enjoyed, their strolls together. She took such a delight in the natural scene and the parts that made it whole. He found such artless joy so endearing, and it filled his heart to the brim. He hoped nothing would ever happen to spoil such moments. Heather had something in her hands, and she held it up as she approached him. "Pie and ale. Do you want it?" He slapped the shire on the rump, and it clopped forward to where its master stood, a few paces away. "Aye," he called. "That I do." When she reached him, he lifted her off her feet and swung her around in a tight embrace. She punched him on the shoulder. "You filthy cooser! You're all muck and muscle." "Aye, my bonny, the way you like it." He kissed her hard. "Put me down, you clootie," she said. He frowned. "Don't call me that, Heather. I'm no a devil." She touched his cheek, obviously surprised that he was fashed. "I'm sorry, Heather. I was thinking of something else." He put her down and went to the rain barrel to dunk his head. The water was cool, and by the time he had dried himself, his former fears had fled. He took her by the hand and accepted the bottle of ale, swilling it down as he walked. She then passed over the pie. They walked up the path leading to the croft, with him munching on the crust and trying to tell her about the morning's work. Halfway to the top of the slope, he swept her off her feet and rolled in the grass, pulling her to him behind a rock. "Connor MacLeod, what are you doing?" He grinned at her. Oh, she cried, but she stroked his hair as if he were a puppy. "In the open, with all the world to see." "There's nane but the hoggies," he said, indicating some sheep nearby. "And they're not looking." She laughed and kissed him. They began to move, rubbing against each other through their clothes. Heather began to breathe heavily. "Oh, you can do that to me forever if you like, my lord." It was the forever she wanted an answer to. He buried his head between her small breasts, and she held it there, tightly. "Will you, Connor? Will you?" "Aye, Blossom, I will." They were suddenly interrupted by the sound of a horse's hooves, and suddenly something went flying over the top of the pair of them. The horseman reined his mount and wheeled to look down on them. "Hello!" said the stranger brightly. They stared at him in amazement. He had on a wide-brimmed hat with a high plume that waved gently in the breeze. Over his shoulders was a cloak of peacock's feathers, the colours of which flashed in the morning sunlight. A scarlet waistcoat, black satin breeks, and high leather boots completed his attire. In the broad belt was a short sword, the like of which Connor had never seen before. It had a white, ornate hilt, a third the length of the blade. "Greetings!" cried the rider, and swept his hat off to Heather in a gallant flourish. "I am Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez, chief metallurgist to King Charles V of Spain." The incongruity of his dress with his surroundings suddenly struck the pair of them as very amusing, and they laughed in unison. The man looked at them sternly enough for them to cease. "I am at your service," he said. Heather turned to Connor. "Who?" Connor jumped to his feet. "What do you want?" Ramirez pointed straight at Connor's chest. "You." The way in which he said it sent a shiver down Connor's spine. "You are Connor MacLeod." "Maybe I am, and maybe you are Connor MacLeod." Connor said nothing. It was not a question this time. The Spaniard continued. "You were wounded in battle 5 years ago and driven from your village, Glenfinnan." Heather said, "Connor." The Highlander took her gently by the wrist. "Heather, go up to the croft." She looked at him defiantly. "I'll stay right here." "Do as I say, woman," he said fiercely. Her arm went rigid beneath his grasp. He had never spoken to her in that tone of voice before, not even when they had quarrelled. Nor had he called her woman. He saw the hurt in her eyes. "Heather, there are some things it's better for you not to know." A summer storm was gathering over them now, and the valley had darkened. Heather glanced at Ramirez and then back at Connor. "I'll go if you ask me to," she said. "Please, Heather." She walked away then, striding past Ramirez on his horse and shooting him a look which would have shriveled him to nothing had the wish behind it been fulfilled. He smiled at her and touched his hat. When she was out of sight, Ramirez reached down with his arm. "Come up behind me," he said. Connor hesitated for a moment, then accepted the hand. The horse with the double load began to walk up the slope and past the croft, with Connor clutching the stranger Ramirez and getting a mouthful of peacock's feathers every time it stumbled. Who was this foreigner, thought Connor. A Spaniard with a funny handful of names, aye, but what did he want? He was a buffoon who dressed in the clothes of a madman. But Connor sensed that beneath the gay, flamboyant dress there was a man with strength, both physical and spiritual. There was a will of steel and a sense of purpose. "Where are we going?" he asked. "Up." "Why?" "To show you who you are." What does that mean? Thought Connor. I know who I am. I'm Connor MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod from Glenfinnan. What else was there to know? What secrets about himself could the stranger reveal that he, Connor, did not already know? I know who I am, a man like you. A man, yes. Like me, yes. But not like other men. We are different, MacLeod. Surely you feel that. Doesn't everyone feel themselves to be special in some way? He said as much. Ramirez replied, You should have died, MacLeod. You should be dead. Doesn't that bother you in any way? I try not to think about it. It was a long time ago. You should think about it. It is the essence of your existence. The stranger's replies were intriguing but unsatisfying, perhaps even frightening. If he was not like other men, then he was like something else. What? I've no devil in me, he said. I'm not the spawn of hell. Ramirez laughed. Is that what they told you? No, MacLeod, not hell. Then what? Who knows? I don't have all the answers. 1 in every 1,000 is born with a hair lip, or a cast in the eye. 1 man or woman in every 1,000,000 is born a genius. Who knows why? I don't pretend to have an audience with God. And 1 in every 50 million is born like you and I, with a special gift, which comes to flower within us at random points within our lives. 1 in every 50 million? I chose that number because it sounded large. I don't really know the real figure. You ask too many questions. You must wait. Overhead, the dark thunderclouds were moving like a flood tide. Ramirez glanced up at them. Not the spawn of hell, he murmured. But there is one of us who might fit that description. What? Asked Connor. All in good time, was the reply. Ramirez took him up to a high point on the hill. There was a tall rock there, a tor, onto which they stepped from the side of the mountain after leaving the horse to graze. Thunder rumbled overhead, and a calm went through Connor. What was he doing here on this high place, with a storm impending? Who was this Ramirez? What did he want? Shouldn't we be sheltering? He said to Ramirez. Instead of exposing ourselves like this, there's a storm coming. As if to confirm his remark, there was a flash on the far side of the valley, followed by a crash of thunder. Not likely, said the Spaniard. I've been waiting for this for some weeks. I watched it come up from the south this morning. Now, I want you to stand with your arm above your head. Aware of the danger of such an action, Connor turned to jump back down onto the hillside. Ramirez drew his peculiar-looking sword. You'll do it, or I'll cut you down where you stand. He flicked out his arm, and Connor reached up to feel a small slit in his vest. Ramirez raised his eyebrows. Eh? He said. The blade flashed by Connor's cheek. He felt the coldness of the steel, but this time there was no cut. Arm up, ordered the Spaniard. Connor did as he was told. A few seconds later, lightning forked out of the sky and found, in Connor's arm and body, a rod through which it could earth itself. Connor was alive with static electricity. It crackled around and through his body, making his clothes smoke and lighting up his whole being with dancing, arcing flashes. Every nerve jangled. He was vibrating, vibrant. Evanescent colours snaked before his eyes. Transient white flares exploded in his brain. He could see the hills breathing, hear the earth suck wind into its lungs. The valley pulsed below him. The mighty hearts of the mountains pounded out a beat that timed with the rhythms of blood in his temple. "The sensation you're feeling," cried Ramirez, "is the quickening." The sky expanded and lanced again. Connor's mind rang with a single phrase: the quick and the dead. The quick and the dead. He fell to the earth at the end of the charge. He felt weak at first, but then, by degrees, stronger, revitalized. "Who are you?" he whispered hoarsely. The bolt of lightning that had struck him should have left him a charred lump on the pinnacle of the rock. Instead, it had filled him with a new kind of strength. He climbed to his feet, and the lightning struck again, tearing the breath from his lungs. Ramirez shouted, "We are the same, MacLeod!" The rain came down, lashing at Connor's body. Thunder crashed through the heavens. "We are brothers!" came the cry.